Beloved, as we prepare to celebrate in this Advent season the birth of Christ in just a few days, I wanted to take a moment to share a few thoughts that I pray will be practical and empowering for you right now, and perhaps prophetic in terms of a promise of moving forward in this new season to new possibilities and new hopes, new faith and new horizons of dreams and objectives in Christ. There are three great songs that are celebrated in the gospel accounts relative to the advent of Christ. There's Mary's song, which is known as the Magnificat. There's Zacharias' song, which is known as the Benedictus. And there's Simeon's song, the aged Simeon, who, when the baby at 8 days old is brought into the temple, begins to say, "Now, Lord, dismiss thy servant in peace." It's called the Nunc Dimittis in the Latin. And Simeon says, "Lord, dismiss your servant in peace, because mine eyes have finally seen what you promised I would see." He knew he couldn't see death before he saw the Lord's Christ. Now, while that is both literal in its textual understanding, it's also metaphorical, because in its application, none of us can see death and what it means until we see the face of Christ. You see, what I'm leading towards is that he goes on to say to Mary in that song, "And this child is appointed for the falling and rising," or the fall and rise of many. And that word rise there is anastasis. It's the word for resurrection. And the order is falling and rising. Or you could say dying and rising. While some emphasize that this is about the overthrow of rulers and the raising up of the last who will become first, it's also about the process of death, burial, and resurrection. As a matter of fact, when Jesus uses the metaphor in his own journey, he uses the metaphor of lost and found. So watch this for a moment, because I want to make application to where you are and where I am and what God may be inviting us to in this season. When Simeon says this child is appointed for the fall and rise of many in Israel, until we see the face of Jesus, we can't fall at his feet and die to who we've been so that we can rise to become who he's called us to be. He is the cornerstone, and when we fall on him, we are broken. But in that brokenness, he blesses us and makes us as bread to the nations. And when Luke continues the story of Jesus as he grows up, at 12 years old, he and his parents make a journey. And that journey is at Passover. And Passover is obviously very significant in Hebrew tradition. It is the very core of the Hebraic story, the Exodus. But there will come an Exodus years later through Jesus that at 12 years old he anticipates. And during that Passover, after the meal, he gets lost in the temple, or at least he is lost to his parents. He knows where he is, but he's lost to his parents. And it's not until 3 days later that he's found. He has gone through a period of being lost and is now found. And in between is a 3-day period, which is always death, burial, and resurrection. I see him, I lose him, I find him again. 30 some odd years later, at another Passover, Jesus makes the same journey from Galilee to Jerusalem, this time with 12 of his disciples. And they break bread together, and one betrays him. And as they're breaking bread, after Judas leaves, Jesus says, "In a little while you won't see me." In other words, I'm about to be lost. But then in a little while after that, you'll see me again. I'll be found. And in the in-between period, you may go through a small season of sorrow. But on the other side, there'll be great, great, great joy. All too often in our lives, especially in the Western culture, we want everything to be great all the time. But life has its downs and its ups. And notice the order in which I said it, our downs and our ups. And I'm using that based on Simeon's song, falling and rising. We want the rising. We always want the rising. But you can't have the rising without the falling. You can't have the foundedness without the lostness. And there are just seasons we go through that if we can learn to recognize the pattern, we can become more joyful in the transition. And what I mean by that is that when you see him in a fresh way, the moment you see him in a way you've never seen him before, you go through a transition. And in that transition, you can feel dislocated, go through a season of being mislocated in order to be ultimately relocated. Dislocation, mislocation, relocation. Falling, rising. I see him. I don't see him. I'm lost. I feel like I'm lost to him. I feel as if he's lost to me, only to discover that I find him in a new way and see him in a new form, and I see myself in a new light as well. This child is appointed for the fall and rise of many. You are one of the many. Embrace the season with hope. Embrace the season with courage. Embrace the season with confidence. If you're in a season of falling, it's because you're being prepared for a new rising. If you're in a down season, even though it's Christmas, there's an up season coming and a new chapter getting ready to be written. If you're in a lost season, it's because you're about to find something you never knew you had. If you're in a season where you feel like you've fallen and you can't get up, here's what I can assure you of. He will pick you up and lift you up because he's the glory and the lifter of your head. I pray for you and your family and your friends and for all of us that this would be a Merry Christmas and that God would bless us all with great hope, great peace, great joy, and great faith for what lies ahead. Much love.